and confident. Even her captain, Francesco Schettino, stood on the bridge, his uniform immaculate. The cold night air bit their skin. Hundreds were gathered there, life jackets half fastened, their faces ghostly arrive, their spotlights cutting across the wreck. Voices in Italian and English shouted through megaphones. Fewer shouted as they heaved survivors from the freezing water. Emma collapsed onto the floor of the boat, coughing up seawater. She climbed a railing, boosting them through a shattered window toward open air. The last thing he heard before diving, a volunteer nurse approached with a clipboard. "Names?" she asked gently. Emma's voice cracked. They watched the wreck from afar, the silhouette of the great ship lying helpless against the rocks. "I can still hear it," Maria whispered from the deep. A groan of metal, a splash, a memory. The ghost of a ship that once carried thousands. Survival tales, or deep dives into the moments when everything changes. Make sure you subscribe because we're just getting started.